TD group, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
So you get like our undivided attention. So we're going to be very casual, so feel free to interrupt. So Mark, you want to explain who you are and then I'll explain my role?
I'm an English teacher at Max Hayes High School in Cleveland, but I'm also an elected trustee for the Cleveland Teachers Union, which means that there are 5 trustees who are elected for the Cleveland Teachers Union, and nothing gets paid for our union unless 3 of the 5 sign off on it. So we kind of make sure that members' dues are spent correctly, and we check every expenditure. And so that's my elected position, but I'm also a director. I'm the director of professional issues. The president of the union appoints people to different directorships, and that means that I work with the district on all things academic, whatever it is, textbooks, teaching styles, summer school, anything that's academic, it kind of goes through me with the union. So I'm kind of like the chief academic officer for the union. That's not the title. So.
I am Debbie Payton. Hi, welcome. I am a teacher on assignment, so my
And
job.
we'll explain that later.
Yeah.
With the thing.
Oh, you're gonna explain that later. So I'm a teacher on assignment, and I'll explain what I do. My background is probably in the K-8 world, with my experience mostly being in middle school. 8th grade is my love, so I love 8th graders. And then my union role is I am the elected member at large, so I sit on the executive board, which means I have a voting power now that I've been elected member at large. I represent high school and special groups because my position puts me in the special group category. It doesn't put me in a high school category. So we have special groups, which is usually like your nurses, your OTPTs, your psychologists, people who are off in their own individual entity that are not necessarily tied to a classroom are called special groups. So I represent those.
And so, just real quickly, we're the Cleveland Teachers Union. We're CTU 279. The local number is when the national organization, which we'll get to in a second, chartered us. So there's another CTU. It's the Chicago Teachers Union, and they're local 1 because they were the first teachers union in the United States. New York is 2 because they were second, but they're the biggest, which is mind-blowing how big they are. But we're 279, so that's our local number. In America, there are 2 teachers unions. There's the AFT, which is the American Federation of Teachers, and then there's the NEA, National Education Association. What's the difference between the 2? This is kind of an association and not a real union. They call themselves a union, but they're really not a union. They're an association. The NEA is about 3 times as big as AFT. AFT, more than not, is more inner city urban educators, and the NEA is more suburban, more rural. That's kind of the breakdown nationally, and that's the breakdown in Ohio, because in Ohio, there's the OFT, which is the state organization for the AFT, and there's the OEA, which is the state organization for the NEA. And then within OFT, there's the CTU. Around here, Berea, Cleveland Heights, and Beechwood are members of AFT, and everybody else in the county is OEA. So that's kind of the breakdown. We have a smaller amount. We have more people, but we have just a few locals. So that's kind of like the breakdown of how the structure works. And when our members pay dues, and the dues for a union is about, in Cleveland, it's about $45 a paycheck. 45 and change. And when you join the union, you're a member of the Cleveland Teachers Union, you're a member of the Ohio Federation of Teachers, and American Federation of Teachers. Not only does your dues pay for the CTU and us to do our job, collectively bargain, healthcare, wages, and working conditions and everything else, it also, and I don't know about AFT, or NEA, but with AFT, every teacher that's a member has $1 million liability insurance policy on that. That's free, or it's part of your dues. So if 2 years from now somebody comes back and sues Deb because he said, you didn't teach my child, there's neglect on your part as an educator, AFT covers that lawyer because you have $1 million insurance policy on you. So we tell all of our, because joining a union is not required. It used to be required in the state of Ohio. It's now not required. You don't have to join it if you don't want to, which means you don't have to pay union dues, but then you don't have that $1 million liability policy. When we have new teachers at new teacher orientation, we tell them, if you do not join the union, make sure that you get a policy on your homeowner's insurance or your renter's insurance that will cover you for that. And it might be close to the same amount of money, so most of the time they join anyway, but we tell them, protect yourself because this is your livelihood. You wanna make sure that you're protected. So if you don't join the union, and even though we don't have to join the union in Ohio, we have 5,000 members. In the CTU has about 5,000 members. We have, what, 7 or 10 who aren't members of the union.
There's not that many.
It's like 10 people who haven't joined the union.
You'd be hard pressed to go into the buildings to find someone who's not in the union. You really would, for whatever reason why they don't join, they don't really share. But, you know, you could go into a classroom and be in the classroom with the kids and you pull out the chair and you ask, John, would you sit in the chair? And you just pull the chair out and John goes home and, my teacher threw me in the chair and they make up all these stories. So you would be silly and foolish not to have that protection, because by the time you actually look at $1 million liability insurance policy and for what you get for it, this is a camaraderie that you can't, it's priceless, and the inner workings of just the union itself and the brotherhood and sisterhood that it offers you, that is really the priceless piece. Because when you have someone within your union who stands up with you, who backs you up, it is just, it's breathtaking to see when that actually happens. And we have that happen all the time, with the teachers for various reasons. But we also include our paraprofessionals in our union and all our substitutes too. So substitutes are included. And I do the new teacher orientation, so when I sign them up for the union, like yesterday, I had a room full of like 15 people, they all signed up, and then the sub-secretaries were mad that they couldn't join the union. They're like, how come we can't join? I'm like, well, because you're a separate union, and I don't know why they don't put you in your union. So the substitutes especially sub-secretaries get really mad when they can't join.
Part of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, there are 7 different unions operating within the Cleveland schools. CTU is the largest by far. There are safety and security has their own union. Secretaries have their own union. Bus drivers have their own union. Custodians have their union. Assistant custodians have their own union. So there's 7 different, so when they negotiate contracts, they negotiate with us, but then there's a Me Too clause where all the other unions get the same thing we get. So if we get a 2% raise, it falls in line that every other union gets that Me Too clause.
It's just vary by district, because last year, my school district, like, the lunch ladies, the bus drivers, custodians, all went on strike, and just like a really long period of time, they're all under the same contract.
Yeah, so it varies by, like, some districts, like Deb said, we cover paraprofessionals in our union. Some unions, they have their own paraprofessional union that's not part of the union. Now, what could have happened is, like, if we go on strike, if Cleveland teachers go on strike, we expect all 7 other unions to go on strike also, to honor our picket line. So there will be no buses, there will be no lunch duty, there'll be no secretaries. So and if they go on strike, they expect us to honor their picket line too. So that could have been what's happening, is that you honor the picket line of the other union. I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, it was, if the teachers didn't join, it was just like basically everyone that wasn't a teacher all like went on strike.
Right, and our teachers union could talk to like the safety and security. If they go on strike, we'd say, listen, we're not gonna honor your picket line, we're gonna teach, but we're going to support you some other way.
Right.
So our president will talk to their president and figure that out. So, Ohio is a collective bargaining state, which means that all decisions, the unions are allowed in the state, and all decisions, the Ohio Department of Education, a lot of things that they do, they use the term local control. And local control means the district has to talk to their union and come to an agreement about it. And because we're a collective bargaining state, we are part of that discussion. Throughout the state of Ohio, there's different, what's the word I'm looking for? There's different engagement of unions. Some unions, like CTU, really take that responsibility and really make decisions with the district on a lot of stuff. And some districts, the teachers will say, we don't need to talk to them or whatever you do. So it just depends on where you are in the state of Ohio, what district you're working for. I'd like to say that the Cleveland Teachers Union is the most active union in the state, and we take our responsibility for educating kids responsibly. Not only are we negotiating bread and butter issues like wages and healthcare and stuff, but we also, we negotiate working conditions for the teachers, which are the learning conditions for kids. So that's always our mantra when negotiations.
And you would be surprised, with administration, how some of them, their backgrounds are very varied. So there's been changes in laws and changes in certification. So when they come up with their ideas and they want to implement them and they don't talk to us, usually they tank. They completely tank, and then they're like, oh, we should have talked to you, and we're like, usually it's damage control.
Yeah.
And we have to come in, or Mark comes in, or somebody else comes in, and they have to damage control what they started or what they did because they didn't talk to us or work with us in the beginning. Because there's a lot of people who don't have an education background in education, and that's mind-blowing. It is absolutely mind-blowing that you could have someone in education who doesn't have an education background. And there are more and more people like that in education. And they're learning the ropes as they go, but they didn't go through a traditional college of education like you are all doing. They went in a different pathway, which is good and great, and they offer a different perspective, but they miss a huge component of that, and they make these big decisions, and they're disasters. I mean, how many times have we used the word disaster when we've talked, and it's just been horrendous.
And sometimes it feels like we're putting out fires, like we're coming behind them, putting out fires and stuff, where we really, what we say as a CTU is, we want to be in the decision-making process. We want to be upfront with you to help make decisions that are, like, make sense for our teachers, make sense for the students, because they may make a decision and it just is an utter disaster in the classroom. You can't do it. So we really want to be upfront, in front of it, instead of putting out fires behind it. But sometimes we spend a lot of our time putting out fires, making sure that cleaning up messes and stuff.
So let's give them a couple examples. Would you like to talk about Workday?
Yeah. So
well, first of all, explain to them what that is,
okay,
and tell
so,
them the Workday story.
So every company has a management system, like an employee management system. Like you have to check in, get your paychecks. You check in your time on there and stuff, and you can see.
Keep track of your sick time and when you took a personal day and all that stuff.
So about 4 years ago, the CMSD bought this thing called Workday. Phil Mickelson golfs, it's on his hat or whatever. So there's a big push for Workday. It's an utter disaster in education. I don't understand. It's a disaster in the schools. It doesn't do what we need it to do. It can't, like, if I go to professional development and I get paid for it, it doesn't tell, it just says PD pay. It doesn't tell you what date it was. It doesn't, things that we need to figure stuff out to make sure that we're paid correctly. And so the big joke around the negotiating table last time was, can you get rid of Workday? Like, can you take it back and get a $17 million store credit? Because it costs $17 million and it doesn't work right. So they're all spending money and they didn't talk to us. They didn't bring us into the discussion and say, does this work for teachers? Is this what you need to figure out your paychecks to make sure your pay is right and stuff? They just bought it and then
And
just
guess
said,
what? It doesn't talk to the subsystem, it doesn't talk to this system, it doesn't talk to that system. So we still have all these systems, but the Workday was supposed to be the one that fixed everything and was the savior and saved us all. And it's,
Did you take back our store credit?
yeah, they want a refund.
$17 million store credit on a credit card.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
So when they make those kind of decisions and there aren't some people at the table who actually understand education, it becomes, disastrous. Now that's on a bigger level, that's on like a HR level, but that just kind of gives you just an example of where, when we're not invited, because sometimes this district doesn't have to invite us to the table. A lot of times that they do, especially in the academic world, they need to invite us to the table. You'd be surprised how many times they don't though.
Yeah.
And then you're putting out.
I want to talk about negotiations real quick. So when we negotiate, in 2016, this is our contract, and it has 31 articles, 31 different articles. And then the back of the book is like 12 or 15 appendices that explain some of the articles. So every district has a contract of some sort. You can go actually on the SERB website and see every district's teacher's contract. SERB, the State Employees Relations Board, has a copy of everything. But every teacher loves this. They grab onto it because they can read what they have to do and what they don't have to do. Because sometimes principals say, we're going to come in on Saturday. No, we're not, we don't have to, but they want, so in 2016, we negotiated this contract. We also negotiated, just last year, a new contract that had some changes. So right now, in Cleveland, there are 2 books floating around, this book and any changes to this book are in here. We're printing a new book, so this one will be thrown away, but right now, this is how we look at our contract language, it's called. So we still use this, but then we use this to see if anything changed.
So it's kind of funny because when I do new teacher orientation and I talk about contract, teachers think, or anyone who's coming into education thinks it's the one piece of paper where you sign your name and this is how much money you're gonna be paid, that's my contract. And that's not your contract. In Cleveland, when we talk about the contract, and Mark said the book, sometimes the book gets like a dirty name, like, are you following the book? Well, yes, we're gonna follow the book because the district agreed to it and the union agreed to it, which means your boss agreed to it, my boss agreed to it, so we have to follow it. So, believe it or not, anything that's in this book is something that needed to be in here for various reasons. So would you like to talk about the PA system?
Yes, so
I'm gonna pass these around so you can take a look.
so there's a section in there, one paragraph, that talks about there can only be one announcement in the morning on the PA system. That sounds like a stupid, ridiculous thing to have to put in a contract book. But you know what? At some point, it had to be there because there must have been some, back in the past, some announcements happening all the time. And I tell the story, when I was teaching in 7th grade, about 10 years ago now, the principal would get on in the morning and do his morning announcement. Okay, that's great. But then at the end of the day, we ended at 2:30, and at 2:25, 2:24, he would get on the PA system and say, "You had a great day today. Go home, make sure you eat a good dinner, have, play outside, do your homework, and I'll see you tomorrow." And he would end it at 2:30 or 2:29, and I was the building chair at this time, because we have 100 buildings, and every one of our buildings elects a building chapter chair, so I'm like enforcer of the contract for that building. And I went to him and I said, "Listen, you gotta stop that PA in the afternoon, or I'm gonna file a grievance to make you stop it. Because I teach 6 classes a day, and each class is 45 minutes long. And if first period, and third period, and fourth period, and fifth period, and 7th period are getting 45 minutes of English, and then you're taking 5 minutes away from English at the last class of the day, 5 minutes times 5 days in 1 week is 25 minutes. And if you do it for 180 school days, how many days of instruction are my kids missing at the end of the day?" So it was in there, and I could say, "I'm gonna file a grievance to make you stop if you don't do it." And he was fine with it, he stopped doing it. He just said, I was just trying to be encouraging I get all that, but you're costing educational time. And in Cleveland, when you have kids that are sometimes behind, because they're the low grade level or not, you need every minute of instruction time that you can. So that's an example of something that might be in the contract that you look at and go, really? We had to negotiate PA system? Or anything else that might look silly, but there's a reason that it's in the book. At some point in the past, it was needed, and we're not taking it out. The district has never sat down in negotiations, and I've been part of 2 negotiations now. The district has never come and said, "We want to take the PA system out of the contract book." Because when we make proposals, the district makes proposals about new contract language and taking contract language out, and we'll make proposals about new contract language and taking contract language. They've never talked about PA system. So they're fine with it, and like Debbie said, when there's a dispute, as an officer in the union, either one of us, we can talk to a principal, we can talk to a regional assistant superintendent, say, "Listen, Eric Gordon, who's the CEO, agreed to this. His signature's on that book, just like the president of the union. It's not the union's contract, it's our collective bargaining agreement." We always try to say it's not the union's agreement, it's the collective bargaining agreement that both sides agreed to. Because if they didn't agree to it, they would have said no, and we would have had a strike or whatever, but they agreed to whatever's in that book, so.
Right, and the book gives you like an uninterrupted lunch.
40-minute uninterrupted lunch.
Like, they can't bother you, they can't ask you to do a duty, they can't ask you to watch a kid, they can't ask you to talk to a parent. You get 40 minutes of an uninterrupted lunch.
And why do you think that's in there? Because at some point,
They
a
were
principal
asking
is saying, "Hey, you got an IEP conference, you got a lunch period. A parent's here to talk to you, talk to them on your lunch. You wanna, something happened where we had to say at some point in the past, every teacher could say 40-minute uninterrupted lunch." And our teachers, they grab onto that, and they don't let go. They'll say, that's my uninterrupted lunch, don't, because they're with kids all day. You sometimes need just that downtime, so.
Right, so there's a lot of things in there. There's all sorts of stuff about our evaluation system. There's stuff about sick time, there's money, there's compensation, there's all that stuff that's in that, in the book. And they love to, and management loves to use the little phrase, well, it's for the children.
Yeah, it's for the
It's for the children.
kids, it's for the good of the kids.
We're doing this for the children. Okay, so they love to throw that up a million times. Yes, we are all here for the children. That's why we got into education. We didn't get into education to be millionaires. So they love to use that little catchphrase. Well, it's for the kids. And when you're new and you get into the buildings, why don't you be on this committee? And why don't you do this? And why don't you do that? And why don't you sign up for this? And why don't you be part of that? And sometimes you have to learn to say no. And you just have to say, I've got too much on my plate. I can't do all this. Maybe next year.
Our new teachers have a hard time saying no.
And they do have a hard time saying no, because we want to be a team player and we want to look into administration, but you have to pace yourself. You can't take on everything that they ask you to do right away. Because just managing your classroom and preparing your lessons and grading papers and communicating with parents takes up a lot of your time. It really does.
And so, just a couple more things on negotiations before Debbie
Oh,
can
yeah.
talk about that. I was hired in the district in 1988, August of 1988. I've not been on strike. So in Cleveland, we haven't had a strike since spring of 1988. So I was hired in August. I missed the strike. Darn. But it was a week-long strike in March of 1988. I hear when I was hired, all the old timers were talking about it and stuff. But I have never been on strike. Have I been close? Twice. I really thought we were going to go on strike. In 2000. The strike deadline was 11 o'clock at night. 10:30, 10:35, they get on the news and say, the strike is over, go to work tomorrow. It's like, oh, I've got to kick all my friends out of my house because we were having a drinking party, Why? We're not going to have school tomorrow, this is great, we're going to be on the picket line. And, I had to kick all my friends out of my house because, they said the strike, it's like, darn. And then the one that was really close was this contract here, the 2016 negotiations. The state law changed in 2013, and it changed the way teachers were evaluated and the way teachers were compensated in Cleveland only. And so our pay was tied to kids' test scores in Cleveland. Every teacher's evaluation in the state of Ohio was tied to kids' test scores in 2013, but we were the only district that our pay was tied to that evaluation. That had to change because for 3 years we were under that system. From 2013 to 2016, and it was bad. Our teachers hated it. It was unfair. Everybody knew it was unfair. So we were charged. Our big charge in that 2016 negotiations was to change how we are paid. Because right now, in every other district in Ohio, you start on step 1 and you go to step 30. Every year you get a pay raise for being alive. And Cleveland in 2013 changed it to how your evaluation was, how you were rated on your evaluation and how you would advance on the pay scale. And if your test scores, your kids' test scores weren't as good as, if my test scores for my kids weren't as good as Debbie's, Debbie made quicker up on the pay scale than I did. She moved faster than I did on the pay scale. It was inherently unfair. So we did a lot of things in that negotiations. We took a vote of our members of no confidence in Eric Gordon, who was the CEO. And that came back with a 98% no confidence vote. So 98% of our teachers, they had a ballot box in every school and they voted no confidence in the CEO and superintendent. We didn't trust him to negotiate fairly. So we had a no confidence vote. So we used that in negotiations, say, we're ready to go on strike. Then we were ready to have a strike vote, but we didn't have to. But we brought a contract back to the membership, and the membership voted no on the contract. And they said, no, this isn't far enough. We need more.
Okay, I'm gonna pause. So he's in negotiations and I am one of the people at 2 different times. So I was a building rep, so I represented the teachers in the building and all the other C2 members in the building. So I have that responsibility of keeping the troops motivated and excited, and we can do this, and they're worried about obviously paying for their bills and taking care of their families and stuff. So on my level, it was rallying the troops, and not one person in my building, we are not crossing that picket line. So you build up the camaraderie with the people in your building, and we're not crossing that line. And They are, and I was with a very veteran staff, so I was much younger with a very veteran staff, leading them, and I'm like the newbie, because I had taken over the position for somebody who had retired. And it is interesting to see, you heard the word scab, you're a scab, and they were like, oh, this person is never coming back in this building if they cross this line. So there's rallying the troops on that end, and then when we were closer again to a strike, the last time Mark talked about, we all got I don't want to strike but I will t-shirts. You want to talk about when everybody comes to work wearing I don't want to strike but I will
And they
t-shirts.
wear it in school.
And they wear it in school and they wear it out, and
We told them every Tuesday wear that shirt.
we
every
had
Tuesday.
strike signs, we had strike captains, I was a strike captain, my uncle was gonna give me the burn barrel. So we were all ready to go, and we were getting everybody motivated and supporting each other while they are, sequestered away, and you're like waiting for the drop of the hat to get any kind of news of what's going on.
And so in 2016, I mean, I'm really happy with that contract, because they voted it down, they said, you can do better, back to the table, do better. And so we used that with the negotiations with the district, saying, our members will vote no again, we'll go on strike. So when the economy wasn't that great in 2016, every teacher's union was getting like 1% raise or whatever. We got a 2.75% raise for 2 years, and then a 2% raise in the third year. So we got bigger raises than the rest of the state, and we got our evaluation system untied from our pay. So we got what we accomplished, we wanted to get done in that negotiation. It took like 18 months of negotiations between negotiating, having a vote, going back to the table. It was like negotiating forever.
It was forever.
And we were out at the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services in Independence. So we were out at the federal mediator's office, the two sides, for every day for like 4 months, getting this contract done. But sometimes that's what it takes, because we don't want to strike, but we will. Sometimes that's our last resort, is to strike. And there's not many strikes that happen for teachers unions, because it is the last resort. Parents don't want their kids home, they have to take off work. And we know that in Cleveland, that's a bigger responsibility, because a lot of our kids, they eat breakfast, they eat lunch at school. And what's going to happen when the schools are closed, are they getting their food? Sometimes that's their only food that they eat, and the parents might be underemployed, and they work 2 jobs, now they have to take off. So we understand the impact, so we have to not only rally the troops at the schools, but we have to rally the community to believe in what we're doing is right. And that's a big job that we take on too, is we have to connect with the community, and we can't be like, just those striking teachers. The parents have to see us as advocates for their kids, and we want to strike because we want better for your kids in the classroom. And that's a message that resonates in the community, but it has to be, because if you don't have community support, you're dead. As a union, you're dead. You can't go on strike, because the parents will, bring their wrath down. I mean, it's hard.
Right, so we don't pull the strike card often, but if we're gonna pull it, and it comes from on top, and they say they're gonna pull it,
We go forward.
we're going out. We're going out, and we're going out big time. So it's not something that's used, and no one ever jokes around and says, oh, we'll go on strike over this or over that. We don't, collectively as a union, we don't use that. Like, even just kidding, we just don't.
Yeah, and in 2016, around the negotiating table, it was very tense, there was no joking or stuff, it was very tense. This last negotiation is in 2019. We joked around a little bit around the table, because there was no big issues that we had to tackle. There wasn't.
We had to clean up
We had
stuff.
to clean up some stuff, we had to get a raise, we had to, but healthcare wasn't changing and stuff, so there wasn't this tense feeling that we had like in 2016. So 2019 was a little different. We were able to joke with the district, and, so it was completely different negotiations. So one of the things that came out, and this will lead to Debbie, one of the things that came out of negotiations in 2016, and we're still trying to do it, is we want teachers to do more leadership roles. We don't want the district to hire more administration to do roles that teachers can do. So we want teachers to start taking on roles in the district as a role of a leader, and to be a teacher on assignment, still paid on the teacher pay scale, but they're just not in front of classes. So right now, Cleveland, we have about 20 teachers on assignment doing various jobs that could have been filled by somebody from administration, but they're actually run by our teachers, and we think that teachers, new teachers especially, will talk to Debbie better than they'll talk to administration. So you can talk about what your job is and what your teacher on assignment is.
So, my teacher on assignment, I was the first one, besides our union president, and he wasn't even called teacher on assignment, he was just the union president, not assigned classes. So Mark had written a grant for the American Federation of Teachers. It was a $500,000 grant. in which we had teachers write lessons that went on Share My Lesson website on AFT, which is a free website that you could get lessons from. And we had teachers actually writing those lessons. So Mark had written the grant, and I did the day-to-day operations of that grant. So I was the first one.
Part of what I wrote in the grant is the district will pay half of Debbie's salary, and the grant will pay half of her salary to be released from the classroom and to run the grant for 3 years. And the district agreed to it because they had to sign off on it. So they agreed to pay half of her salary while she was on assignment running this grant for the American Federation of Teachers.
Right, so I did that for 3 years, and it was very, very successful. We squeaked out a 4th year out of the grant money, so it went really well. But what was coming into play at the time was the resident educator program. So when you leave college, most of you will get a resident educator license. That's your 4-year. It's basically a provisional license. When I graduated, it was provisional. Now they renamed it to a resident educator license. And it's the induction program by the state of Ohio into teaching, except they give all the induction duties to the school district, and the school district decides. They put very little parameters on it. It used to be very scripted and very intense, and they pulled back over the years. And then they've given more control to the districts, and their resident educator program is different. So Cleveland's resident educator program is different from Cincinnati, it's different from the diocese, it's different from Berea, it's different. There's some things that are uniformed just a little bit, but there's a lot more local control. So I run the program for the district. I actually, ironically, took it from an administrator. They originally had an administrator do the program, and it was a disaster. It was a complete disaster.
And part of my role is I talked to the head of HR at the time and said, this should be a teacher on assignment. You know, this should be a teacher running this program, because new teachers will want to talk to a teacher more than they'll talk to an administrator. And so we negotiated over the phone. We negotiated like how much mentors get, how much, you know. So we negotiated all this over the phone, but her job came out of that.
Yeah, so that's where my job evolved from. So at the time, we were hiring mass amounts of teachers. So I had probably the biggest resident educator program in the state. I had so many people coming in because there was retirements and we were hiring and there was a lot of people. We've kind of leveled out now. I probably have like 100 in each year, give or take, for the 4 years. It's a little less this year. It's in the 60s for my year ones, like low 60s. But they also hire in 5-year professional teachers, and that's probably high 40s, low 50s of how many they hire in. So if you average them together or put them
And
together.
they're not in the RE program.
Yeah, they're not in the RE program. So I run that. So when you go into teaching, you will follow whatever the qualifications are or whatever they make you do for their district. So we pretty much stick with what is mandated by the state. So we use the state forms. You will work with a mentor and be assigned a mentor. You work on a self-assessment. You work on a class profile and looking at the data for your students. You will work collaboratively with your mentor and fill out what the state calls a collaborative log. You will have to be formally observed by your mentor. We do it in a non-threatening way, so we model it after our evaluation system, but we don't put it through our evaluation system. But the scripting of what you do and putting in evidence, it's much more laid back, but it's all on paper, it doesn't go in the system. And think of it like a critical friend to help you out. And then, the second year, you have the option to take RESA, which is the Resident Educator Summative Assessment. That's what we call the test, the video and questions, like EdTPA. It is not EdTPA, it's definitely different, but if you take EdTPA, believe it or not, I know you don't wanna hear it, but it does prepare you. The mass amounts of the people will say, I took EdTPA, I feel pretty decent, and the ones that don't take EdTPA are like, they don't know what I'm talking about. So they've revamped it. It used to be very cumbersome, very, very cumbersome, and you have to pass all different parts and all different sections. Now it's a video of you actually teaching a class, and that's submitted to the state, and then you answer 8 questions. 3 of them are probably your planning, and then the rest 4 to 8, those questions are about the video itself. And you get a mentor who can help you facilitate with that. So the assessor will only watch 20 minutes of the video. So if you take a 50-minute lesson, you toggle the switch over and they'll only watch 20 minutes of what you do. But in that 20 minutes, you really have to show good teaching. And we talk about, and we help our teachers on how to show that in the 20 minutes that you have to do. So as much as you hate EdTPA, and I know you do, it really does get you ready, because a lot of my people have done they struggle. They get very, very nervous, and then they tape, and then they retape, and they tape, and they retape. So the confidence level, if you're like, if I can survive EdTPA, I can survive this. So I run the program, you know, and I tell them the year you take RESA, the state pretty much watches you. So if you don't do what the state asks you to do, they send emails to the district, which goes to Eric Gordon, which goes to me, like, you didn't activate, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. You get 3 attempts at RESA in passing. So most people pass it the first time they take it. Our percentage rate is really good. This last year we had like 89.6. The year before we had like 91, 92. And the only reason it dropped is because we had less RESA takers. I think I had 208 last year taking RESA. Before that I probably close to 300, I had a ton of people taking RESA. So they do really well. So you can take it as a year 2. If you choose to. There's really no advantage right now to take it as a year 2. Most people take it in year 3 because state law says you have to take it in year 3. And year 4 in Cleveland we do leadership. So since I run the program, stuff comes to me. So I make it very much doable and realistic. So for leadership, what are you doing already in your building that is a leadership activity, and you reflect on it and you write about it. Don't reinvent the wheel. If you're part of your TBTs, if you're doing a community engagement with the community, write about it and reflect it. So we try to make it non-cumbersome and extra work for anybody in the program. And then after the 4 years, you're tracked in a system called CORE, and I have to put information on you, and then I have to say whether each year you do it. And then when you're done with the 4 years, you can advance to your 5-year professional license. And you don't need any coursework the 4 years that you're under the resident educator program, unless ODE says you need something. If ODE says you need something, you have to do it. So for example, the law changed with reading and phonics, so some of the teachers need reading and phonics, which means they have to take a reading class or a phonics class because they didn't have it. They'll get that during the 4 years they're under the resident educator license, but the resident educator program and passing RESA is your coursework. So you don't need extra coursework unless ODE tells you, you know, you have a limitation on your license or something that you have to do for them. Do you have questions about licensure, RESA, anything? Because Mark and I have talked at you and you've all been listening. We feel bad. That's not what you should do when you teach. That's bad. Don't do what we just did.
One of the programs that we have in Cleveland that's unique to Cleveland, only a few other places have it, is a peer assistance and review program. We call PAR. And what it is if a teacher is struggling, they can be put into PAR, peer assistance and review, and no longer is the principal their evaluator, but a teacher mentor works with them to support them, but also evaluates them throughout the year. And at the end of the year, they can recommend termination for that teacher. Even if they have a 5-year professional license or a permanent license or a continuing contract, they can be terminated at the end of the year based on the information from this PAR mentor. So, and the person who runs the program for PAR is a teacher on assignment just like Debbie, and she's really good. But one of the things that
Are you going into triage or no?
no, I'm going into non-reappointment.
Oh, non-reappointment.
So the state law says that any teacher on a limited contract can be non-reappointed at any time. So there's 2 different contracts in Ohio. There's a limited contract where you sign your contract every year and you send it back to the district, and it's a year-to-year contract. There's also something called a continuing contract, which is, I have it, Debbie has it. If you get a master's degree beyond your bachelor's, you can apply, and you have to have 3 years or 4 years of teaching in the same district. You can apply for a continuing contract, and your principal would have to sign off on it, and then the district gives you a continuing contract, and you sign that contract once, and you never sign another contract again.
It's like tenure.
It's tenure. You can't be non-reappointed, because in Ohio, state law says that teachers on limited contract can be non-reappointed at the end of the year for no reason. You all have limited contracts. I, as a principal, can say I'm going to non-reappoint all 4 of you, and you don't have a job next year. So it's really important to get continuing contract tenure when you can, because it gives you the ability to talk out, speak up, and stuff. Because they can't fire you except for 5 distinct reasons that are in state law. You can't be fired if you have a continuing contract. In our contract book, we have said, even though state law says teachers can be non-reappointed for any reason at the end of the year, we have to have a teacher, if a teacher's going to be non-reappointed in Cleveland, they have to have 3 separate hearings. One with the principal, one with the regional superintendent, and one with the Eric Gordon or his designee. And every year the district will put 40 teachers up for initial non-reappointment, and we'll get that number down to about 5. So it goes from, so one of the things that we offer as a union is protection when there's non-reappointment hearings. So at the end of every year, we get a list of it. Officers are assigned different people to work with. We have the hearings and we'll point out, this teacher should put them in par, give them another year. This is a teacher that maybe should be saved with some help. Maybe they're not terrible. They just need some help on classroom management, or they need some help in something that isn't pedagogical. They understand how to teach, they understand, but they just can't control the classroom. I think a year in par might help them. So many times we'll put teachers in par that might be non-reappointed. So one of the things that our union does is we help newer teachers who might be non-reappointed, and that's in the contract. That's, every other district, there's no hearings, you're just non-reappointed. They put it to the board, the board votes on it, and they don't have a job. We have contract language that protects non-reappointment hearings and says you have to have 3 different hearings. And you can't be non-reappointed if you didn't have a full evaluation cycle. So if you didn't go through the evaluation cycle, you can't be non-reappointed. So we have different things in our contract that are stricter than state law that the district must prove to non-reappoint even a limited contract teacher.
I think your class ends.
At 11.
Oh, at 11. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure what time it is.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, perfect. Okay, I was like, oh, I don't want to hold you guys.
So I'm just trying to think of
What questions do you have? What do you have? What's like anything that we said that spurred your thinking? Anything you want to know about?
Do most unions have a giant script or a book?
ours are bigger than most
Yeah, ours are very much.
because they have to be.
Yeah.
Just because it has, PA system in there, and it has other things in there. I live in Bay Village. I've looked on the website, website for Bay Villages. Bay Villages might be 100 pages. I think that's 300 pages. So every district is different. It just is what is in their contract, what they negotiate, what they want to keep in their, one of the things that there was a real fight in 2013 negotiations because they wanted to wipe that book clean and say fresh start. And we're not going to start fresh with all the things that we already have earned through negotiations. And that was a real big sticking point in 2013 because they wanted to just wipe out the book and start fresh. And that's one of the things that the state, on a state level, there's something called and this is not for teaching, but the Academic Distress Commission. Some districts that are poor performing get put into this Academic Distress Commission. Lorraine is in it, Youngstown is in it, Warrensville Heights avoided it. They almost were going to be in it. And one of the provisions of the law is when you are put in Academic Distress Commission, the superintendent is fired and the teacher's contract is null and void, and you have to negotiate a new contract. So that's a real nuclear option that we're lobbying on the state level to get rid of that because we don't believe it's fair. Even though Cleveland will never be in it because we have our own law that pertains only to Cleveland, we think that it's unfair to other districts to have their contracts wiped out. So we're lobbying on the state level. So one of the things that we have in our union too, union dues by law cannot be used for political purposes. And so some people don't join the union because they think that it's going to be used for political purposes, whether it's Republican, Democrat, abortion, whatever. We have something called the Committee on Political Education Code, COPE, and teachers voluntarily donate extra money out of their paycheck. I give $15 every pay. Some teachers can give as little as $1 every pay. And it goes into a separate fund, a separate COPE fund that is for political purposes only. We use it to pay for lobbyists in Columbus. We use it to support political candidates on a statewide level. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Democrats. It's people who believe in public education. So one of our biggest people that we support is a Republican Senator, Peggy Lehner from down south. She believes in public education. When they were going to wipe out the resident educator program, she lobbied and we lobbied her and she lobbied the state and kept it in. She's the head of the education committee for the Senate. She's a very powerful lady in Columbus and we support her. In fact, our union, state union every year awards their highest honor, and we honored her 2 years ago as a supporter of public education. So it doesn't matter if they're Republican or Democrat, it's who supports public education, who believes in public education, less charter schools, expansion of charter schools, and really believes in the power of public education in the state of Ohio. So we have a political committee or a COPE where voluntary money is taken out. So our dues cannot be used for public or political purposes, and they're not.
say in the event of a strike, since one hasn't happened even before you started,
Yeah.
is there any protections for the teachers under the union, other than we just don't cross the picket line?
We don't cross the picket line, and when we got close to striking in 2016, the district was going to issued and said, we're gonna cut off your health insurance immediately. Like, you want to strike, we're gonna cut off your health insurance. So that was their volley, because teachers know that they don't get paid when they go on strike, but we also made sure that we inform them, strikes end, but bad contracts don't go away. So if you agree to a bad contract, that does not go away for a long time, but strikes eventually will end. Even in Strongsville, where they had an 8-week strike and it was terrible, and things like strikes end. Like Chicago's is in their second week, it's gonna end soon, we don't know how it's gonna end, but it's gonna end. So you fight for what you want, and we tell people, like when we were going into the negotiations in 2016, we told our teachers in 2014 and in 2015, it's going to get ugly. Save your money now. Don't buy a car, maybe use your car another 2 years. Big purchases like buying a house, maybe wait a year or two. Like we were very intentional in telling people from the leadership of the union, save your money. Put away a strike fund, because we don't pay, teachers don't get paid when they're on strike. So we were very intentional in telling people, save your money. And people listened. I mean, they did. They bought into the whole notion of a strike, because to go on strike or to threaten to go on strike is really a 2-year process. You have to get the community behind you. You have to get your teacher. You can't just go on strike and teachers go, I have no money. You really have to it's a powerful thing to do.
Right. And if you've been watching the news, you'll see that Eric Warren is doing a series of community meetings about basically right-sizing the district and looking at our schools and seeing what schools need to consolidate or close. If you've been paying attention to the news, if you see any of that. So that's what we're going through now. Is he announced on Friday what schools that he's going to close or consolidate or move together. So that's the next new fire that's out there.
So one of the things that, and that's a great point, because one of the things Chicago is fighting for is, if Cleveland closes 8 buildings, the students go to 8 different buildings, and the teachers go to where there are openings. Teachers follow the kids. So if my building gets 100 more kids, I'm gonna need 6 more teachers. It just makes sense. In Chicago, their contract says, if you close buildings, those teachers are out of a job. They're not guaranteed a job in
So
the
their
district.
structure is a little bit different.
So they're fighting to get what we already have, which is, if you close buildings, that's okay, I still am an employee of the district, I have a job somewhere. And so, unless there's layoffs, when there's layoffs, it always goes by seniority, so that's one of the reasons Chicago is striking, is to get what we already have. So closing buildings, okay, that's bad, but it's, you wanna serve all the parts of the community, but you have to make sure that you don't have a building built for 4,000 people with 350 people in it, like Collinwood High School. Makes no sense to have 350 students in a building that's 5 floors big and huge, so it makes sense to right-size the district, but those teachers are gonna follow where the kids go.
So, anybody thinking about urban education?
Potentially,
Potentially?
because like I grew up in CMSD, I'm
Oh.
part of the system.
Where'd you go?
Where'd you go?
High school, I went to Bard.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
On the west side?
Yes.
The Bard on the west side?
Yes.
Oh.
Where'd you
I
go?
was the first graduating class.
Okay.
Awesome.
So,
Where'd you go, K?
K through 4, I was at RG Jones,
Mhm.
and
Okay.
5 through 8, I was at Garfield.
Okay. I know those buildings well.
We know those buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you like Bard?
I did. It was interesting, but it was worth
We
it.
could probably rattle off names of people that you have. This teacher, this teacher, this
Yeah.
teacher, this
We
teacher.
probably had almost all of them.
You probably did. You probably had them all. You probably had them all.
I only wanted to teach in Cleveland when I came out of college. It was just something I wanted to do, and I'm glad I did. And, it's been a great career.
And you can be a teacher leader without being an administrator.
Right,
Don't-
absolutely. In Cleveland, you don't have the opportunities are there to be a leader and not need the classroom. You can do other things and be a teacher leader in a building or in the district and not have to be an administrator.
I guess we're running out of time.
Yeah.
All right. Any last
Any last
questions?
thoughts or comments?
Well, thank you very much
Oh,
for
thank
coming.
you.
That's very
Good luck with everything. Good luck on your journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you guys can keep those.
Oh, yeah, and I have one for you, also.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're gonna be like, my contract book's not thick enough. What's wrong with this district? This is your contract book.
Right.
Yeah, see, yeah. You knows I spelled my name right too.
Yeah, probably, I probably spelled it wrong.
So now you set, were you, that's everything set for 2019 to?
He was in.
2000, well, it's a
last
one-year
semester.
contract that rolls over automatically if either
Oh.
side wants to change the negotiation.
Oh, I see.
So
How's it going?
they couldn't
Good.
certify money beyond
I think next
levy
spring, we would,
levies in 2020.
Oh.
Cause I have
So
my bachelor,
they couldn't-
roundabout way, I have my
they couldn't,
bachelor's in criminal justice, and
Okay.
now I'm doing the initial
certify
life.
the money to
Yeah.
give us a
Oh,
raise,
nice.
so we got a 1% raise this
That's
year.
awesome.
We'll have 0%
But you
for
live on
but
this side of town, right?
healthcare's
I
not
live
changing,
on
the language isn't
Normal.
changing.
Yeah.
so
Oh, okay, yeah, you're
that's
on the
fine,
side
as
of
long as
town.
healthcare
Yeah, 'cause
stays
Streetsboro
consistent, that's
big height.
huge.
Yeah,
Healthcare.
Yeah.
That's what we got here.
So
like, I'll
teachers
take
will
my
really
time
take
every
a
day,
0%.
go
Yeah.
practice it back.
You know,
Yeah.
now if the district gets more
Are you
money.
coaching on the side?
No,
Do you
some
know?
of the district, we want to go
Yeah.
negotiate this year, and the contract
I'll
is
let
up for
school work.
negotiations,
Well,
and we can try to get more money and stuff like that,
Yeah.
or the district can say.
You guys
before
always-
December
I mean,
1st,
They
we
hire,
want-
yeah, they
we
hire
want
all the
to
time,
negotiate.
they're
Cause I
hiring.
know like
So whatever,
my
so
passion is history, and
we
that's
have
what
to
I'm going with, and I know that the.
notify the other side before.
So it's just-
December 1st comes and goes,
Yeah.
it's another year roll.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you never
So,
know, you
yes,
never
we-
know,
we
cause there'll be,
learned
you
the
know, another
board's
wave of
always been
retirements,
terminal.
another
But
wave of.
this is-
Right, that's what
We're
the
trying
big
just
thing
because
I've heard
of
is that
and
the
if
last
it's
change in the
finally
state
permanent,
retirement
right,
system,
so
a lot of
therefore
teachers are putting off their retirement until about June now-ish.
you know,
Yeah, they're moving, they're moving.
Yeah.
put living in the
Like
battle,
this
make
one
it
will go,
permanent.
and, you know, I mean, they're,
You know,
Right.
Right,
keep
so.
plugging away, don't
so-
give up.
All right.
It was nice to see you.
Nice to see you. 20, I think, here.
Yeah, take care.
And, which is a good thing, and then we don't have to worry about not being a certified contract.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that was really good.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
It's
No
nice to come out and,
Talk to the kids.
talk to the
Yeah.
kids, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Really helps, because I can't, Mark, I can't go through what you guys just went through, you know, and talk about everything, it's all so theoretical, you know, so.
Right,
But, yeah, I really, you know, I'm gonna look for that handout that you gave last time.
I don't remember where to put it.
Because, I pointed to my office, that's what I was pointing
Oh,
out.
I was like, I
I'm gonna
don't,
look for that, cause I think I've got it, but I just think that that's one of the things too that,
next one, I should bring it next time.
Yeah, I know.
I gotta put,
I gotta
maybe
look
we'll
for
put it, maybe we'll put this little thing we were scribbling on in a folder with stuff.
Right, exactly.
yeah, well, I hope you do come back in the spring too.
Oh, yes, we'd love to.
Just email and let us know.
Okay,
I'd love
that's
to, it
terrific.
works out great.
It does.
Yeah, well, this is terrific, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No problem, thank you.
Okay, you guys
We'd
have
love
a
to
good
get some
day.
graduates from Baldwin Wallace and apply to Cleveland too.
Yeah, well, we're looking at roads